Beijing has released a little information about this ninth round of talks now underway in Washington, D.C., and has repeated the principles it has taken to the negotiations.
China is willing to work with the American team to make efforts together to seriously implement the important consensus reached by the two leaders during their meeting in Argentina.
The pace of the talks has quickened. The recent two rounds were held less than a week apart, but the spokesman was tight-lipped about the details of the recently finished eighth round as well.
They discussed related wording and made new progress. It has created good conditions for the ninth round of talks.
With a few public words to go on, the world looks to what actions are being taken. That might hint at progress behind closed doors. China's State Council recently announced Beijing will postpone tariffs on vehicles and the vehicle parts made in the U.S. And Beijing said it will keep its deadline for those tariffs open. This corresponds to Washington's action to postpone the increase of tariffs from 10% to 25% on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods.
The actions taken by the two sides undoubtedly will help create a good atmosphere for the China-U.S. trade talks.
These actions extend earlier commitments made by the presidents of both nations when they met at the G20 summit in Argentina on December 1st last year. There, they reached the 90-day truce and decided to negotiate a deal during this period. The recent two talks were back-to-back, and the Beijing statement about them was quite brief. Some experts believe that the negotiations are in their final stage, and both Beijing and Washington want to limit the published information about the talks, so the two teams and the decisions won't be disturbed by outside factors.
The first foreign trip of the year for China's premier were taken not far from where the president just visited.
From April 8th to the 12th, Premier Li Keqiang is scheduled to attend the 21st China-EU summit in Brussels and the 8th summit of China and Central and Eastern European countries in Croatia, and he will pay an official visit to Croatia.
The visit comes just after Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visits to Italy, Monaco, and France in late March, which were Xi's first foreign trips of 2019. The foreign ministry says Li's visit will expand China's friendship with Europe.
During Premier Li's stay in Brussels, he will hold talks with EU leaders Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker. They will witness the signing of a series of agreements.
Li's stay in Croatia will include much of the same, when he meets with leaders of 16 Central and Eastern European countries. Experts say this sub-regional cooperation has also gained momentum in recent years.
The trade volume between China and these Eastern European countries surpassed $80 billion in 2018, a year-on-year increase of over 20%. The numbers are very strong amid a slowdown in global economic growth. There are broad prospects for trade cooperation. The two sides will review achievements and plan a direction for further cooperation at the 16+1 summit.
Last December, China issued its third policy document toward the EU, showing its good wishes to develop the comprehensive strategic partnership with the EU. And on March 18 in Brussels, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and senior EU officials agreed that the cooperation and the consensus between both sides far outweigh the competition and the differences. And late in March, Chinese President Xi Jinping, together with leaders of France, Germany, and EU, sent a strong signal that China and the EU will strengthen strategic mutual trust and deepen cooperation. As the Foreign Ministry says, Premier Li Keqiang's visit will further strengthen ties between China and Europe, as well as build more consensus for broader cooperation in various fields.
WTO slashes its growth projection for 2019 to the lowest level in 3 years, down to just 2.6% from its earlier estimates of 3.7%.
Of course, there are other elements at play, but rising trade tensions are the major factor to the stories today. Greater uncertainty means definitely lower investment and consumption. Investment in particular has a quite pronounced impact on trade.
The updated forecast reflects similar scaled-down readings from the World Bank and International Monetary Fund.
We believe that we are in this sort of delicate moment where the growth momentum has slowed down and has slowed down pretty much across the board. We see 70% of our global economy slowing down compared with what we had anticipated a few months ago. So this is widely spread.
The WTO report also says although the volume of global trade grows slowly in 2018, the dollar value rose 10%. Strong import growth in Asia contributed to an increase in the commercial services trade sector, which grew by 8%. Goods trade volumes are expected to grow more strongly in developing economies this year, with 3.4% growth in exports compared with 2.1% in developed economies. It also said trade growth could rebound slightly to 3% in 2020 if trade tensions ease.
We all need trade to play its positive role in supporting jobs, growth, and development around the world, and we need the rules-based trading system to play its full role in facilitating trade flows and providing stability in international economic relations.
For Afghani refugee Ali, the decision to settle in the rural town of Griffith, where he now has his own business, was an easy one.
Here very friendly. Yeah. And also we can find easy job as well, because the population not too much.
Australia's government hopes that more new arrivals will take the same path to less populated towns under new changes to permanent migration. That includes cutting the country's annual migrant intake by about 30,000 people and providing incentives for some new arrivals and international students who choose rural areas over Australia's major cities. According to the federal government, about 112,000 skilled migrants arrived in the country last financial year. Out of that number, it says more than 8 out of every 10 people settled here in Sydney or in Melbourne. The government argues that its major cities are struggling under rapid population growth, impacting everything from public transportation to housing.
There's no doubt that we have got substantial congestion. Anyone who lives in Sydney realises that, or Melbourne.
University of Technology Sydney professor Jock Collins studies immigration and its impacts.
The problem is that the large immigration program, in fact over now 7 decades, hasn't been met by the required public infrastructure investment.
And there are concerns that the new measures won't have much impact. The new cap on permanent migration is only 2,000 less than the number of permanent migrants who arrived here last year. And there doesn't appear to be any policies in place to ensure that people who initially move into rural centres remain there. Much of Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison's election campaign recently has focused on being tough on border security and stopping boats filled with people seeking asylum in Australia illegally. University of Sydney political science lecturer Stuart Jackson says the attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand earlier this month, which claimed 50 lives, has forced Australia's government to change its election focus.
Post-Christchurch becomes not possible to talk about holding those people away. Somehow they are, brown people who shouldn't be brought here, or words to those effect. You have this situation of, well, we can't talk about it in the context of white supremacy. We might be seen as being racist, or very specifically racist. So we'll talk about migration then, and we'll talk about who comes to the country and what do we need here.
The new changes are set to take effect in July.